in Grandma's Attic by Arleta Richardson. Illustrated by Dora. Chapter 15. Pa and the Dishwater. Grandma and I were visiting her old home, and I was having fun exploring the farm I had heard about in so many stories. Uncle Roy didn't mind my tagging along with him as he went about his work, and I wanted to see everything there was to see. As we sat at the dinner table, I listened quietly to Grandma and Uncle Roy remind each other of the good and bad times they remembered about that old house and farm. "Well, Mabel," said Uncle Roy, "I hear you've been telling stories about me and that old door." "Yes," said Grandma. "I thought that it was too good to keep." Uncle Roy laughed. "It was," he admitted. "And if I had time, I could tell about a time you had some trouble with Pa, too. But I have to get back to my work. I can't sit here and gossip with you ladies." Uncle Roy left, and I turned to Grandma eagerly. "What did you do that got you in trouble, Grandma? Do you remember?" "Yes, I think I remember what Roy was talking about," Grandma answered. "I didn't get spanked for it, but Pa was sure disgusted." "Tell us about it, Mabel," said Aunt Julia. "I'll just start clearing the table while you talk." "It had to do with dishes," said Grandma. "I was still quite young, as I recall. Ma didn't often leave me to do dishes alone, but occasionally she had something to do, and I managed the supper dishes by myself. This evening was in the winter, and it got dark early. We had no kitchen sink then, so we did the dishes on the table. When the dishes were done, the dishpan was carried out behind the chicken house and the water thrown away. Ma usually took care of this, not only because the dishpan was heavy for me, but because I was afraid of the dark. Nothing could induce me to go past the back porch by myself after dark. The boys teased me. Ma and Pa both tried to reason with me, but I was not moved. They could say what they liked. I was convinced that most anything could be lurking beyond the porch, waiting for me to come out. So this evening I dawdled with the dishes as long as I dared. I thought perhaps if I took long enough, Pa or the boys would come in from the barn, and I could persuade one of them to take the dishwater out for me. Of course, I didn't have much faith in getting the boys' help. They would just call me Baby and tell Ma I was acting like a foolish girl. But Pa was usually kind-hearted. I thought I could probably get around him. Ma finally realized that the job was taking unusually long and called to me. "Mabel, aren't you through with those dishes yet? What's taking you so long?" "Yes, Ma," I answered. "I'm almost through. I have to empty the water and wash the dish towels." "Well, hurry," said Ma. "I need to try this dress on you before I can do much more." I knew my time was up. There was no sign of Pa, so I would have to brave it myself. I opened the door, and picking up the dishpan, I held it close and backed out, pushing open that old screen door. Oh, it was dark out there. I shivered and thought how far it was to the chicken house and back. What if something jumped out at me? I'd probably die of fright. Then they'd all be sorry. I stood on the porch and peered into the darkness. The longer I looked, the more sure I was that I didn't want to leave. Why couldn't I just throw the dishwater over the edge of the porch and rush back in? I knew why not, of course. Ma would never allow such a thing. But Ma wasn't there, and since water sank into the ground, she need never know. The idea seemed better all the time. With one look over my shoulder, to be sure she had not come to check on me, I threw that dishwater as hard as I could. Unfortunately for me, Pa chose that very moment to come around the side of the house. The flying dishwater hit him full in the face and ran down the front of his overalls. I was horrified. The dark didn't bother me now. I had more trouble than that to think about. Pa spluttered and tried to find a dry place on his sleeve to mop his face. "What in the world are you doing?" he roared. "Are you trying to drown me?" He stumped into the kitchen, and I followed timidly behind. Of course, Ma heard the racket and came to see what had happened. Pa was wiping his hair and face with the towel and muttering something about a fool trick. I was in tears, still clutching the dishpan and standing by the door. Ma saw at once what I had done, and she got clean water for Pa to wash his hair and face. When things had settled down a bit, Ma turned her attention to me. "Now wasn't that a foolish thing to do?" she said. "Why didn't you call me to help you, or wait until Pa came in? You ought to be ashamed of yourself." I was. It wasn't much use to tell Pa I was sorry. I knew I deserved punishment and expected to get it. However, by the time Pa was dried off, he began to see the funny side of it. I was sent to bed early, but I could hear him and Ma laughing in the kitchen. I went to sleep determined not to do that again. The next time, Pa might not see the joke and I would be in trouble. Grandma and Aunt Julia finished the dishes and went to sit on the porch. I wandered out to the orchard in search of Uncle Roy, and possibly some more stories about when he and Grandma were little. End of chapter 15.